Hi guys, welcome to the 2X e-commerce podcast show. This is your host Kunle Campbell, and as I promised, for the next few days, we're going to be having expert panels or shows specifically dedicated on how you can potentially handle the COVID-19 situation we have at hand. It's not obviously there's no broad stroke solution to this, but I am very certain from everybody's insight, you'd be able to take one or two tips that you could, take action with right away in your businesses. And on our last show, we had an e-commerce AI expert on board. We had an Amazon person on board, and we had an attorney on board. Now, on this episode, we are very much knee-deep into the e-commerce industry. We have two people or two businesses from the logistics perspective. And we have another business, which you most definitely have heard about, to check out. They're in the payments, segment. And, these are kind of like, operational backbone. Is operational backbone for any e-commerce business. I'm super excited to welcome Erich, Refael, and Yuri to the show. I'm not going to introduce them. They're going to individually introduce themselves. I'm going to start out with Erich. Erich, welcome. Please introduce yourself to a minute or less.
Thank you. I'm Erich Litch. I'm President and Chief Operating Officer of To Checkout. We're a leading e-commerce subscription billing and payment processing provider, and we support over 20,000 merchants all over the world.
Brilliant. Thank you. Refael, please.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Kunle, for having us here. So my name is Refael. I'm the CEO of Unicargo. Unicargo is a freight forwarding company dedicated to e-commerce sellers, entrepreneurs, mainly Amazon sellers. That's what we do. We do logistics, air, ocean, road, warehousing, logistics, everything related to moving products from country to country, customs regulation, warehousing, reverse logistics, everything related to logistics in the e-commerce world.
Super interesting. I have a ton of questions for you, Refael. Okay, and then finally, Yuri, how are you? Could you introduce yourself, please, and your business?
Hello, yes. So I'm Yuri Stapik. I'm a Chief Operating Officer of Logistics Plus. It's a privately held logistics and solutions company. It's a combination of a 3PL and a 4PL. It's a company that manages a lot of entire supply chain. That includes, sometimes as deep as procurement and SKU identification, and sometimes it's just a transactional freight forwarder that does a lot in the e-commerce world as well. We do forward logistics, we do full compliance, we do a lot of cloud support all over the world for a lot of different clients as well.
Super interesting. And I like the term 4PL. We'll delve into that shortly. Okay, I'm going to start out with, I really want to get a situation analysis. So we're recording this as at Thursday, the 19th of March. You guys watching it on YouTube or listening to this on a podcast might get it 2 days later. However, today, what has the last 5 days or last week look like? I'm going to start again with Erich from a payment standpoint. What are your customers experiencing? You service the e-commerce industry, I believe, and subscription economy. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Erich.
Yeah, we handle merchants across all types. So from all you do is provide a subscription service to maybe you just sell software to actually you sell some kind of physical good, like sunglasses or whatever you might want to sell, toothbrushes or, so we handle a lot of different kinds of merchants. And, we have obviously lots and lots of transactions go through our platform for these 20,000 merchants. And we did analyze the data on that for the first quarter and looked at to see if we saw any spikes in volume. And we did not see, before last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, we started to see a significant change. But last week was very significant in certain countries, right? So last week we saw massive spikes in Italy and Spain. But that's because I think most people were focused on physical store channels in terms of shoppers. physical store channels in the months of March and in months of February and early March, because those channels were available and they were the quickest way to access the products that you were looking for. You saw people hoarding certain types of products, emptying grocery shelves, things like that. Now that's not really available. So I do believe now we're going to start to see a fairly substantial spike in online traffic and online volume in the various countries where they're basically prohibiting you from going out and using other channels.
Which will bring me to the logistics arms of things. There's one thing being able to pay, and there's another getting your goods delivered to you in a lockdown. So I will move this question off to Refael. So Refael, what are you guys seeing? What have you seen in the past week from a logistics standpoint, and what do you anticipate?
All right, so as we discussed earlier, the major crisis started with China, and now we see that China is slowly getting back on track. Like, we did a survey with 50 of our biggest clients, manufacturers, and we started surveying, hey, when did you open your factory? How many employees you got back from the Chinese New Year holiday? And we see that from that survey, about 80% of the factories are reopened again, and most of them are working with over 80% capacity, production capacity. So things are looking very good for China now. But the problem is now the US and Europe. Europe is getting on a complete lockdown. US is just starting to wake up to understand the size of this crisis. And for us, it's a scary situation as well, because think about, we have hundreds and hundreds of shipments on their way, whether most of them by ocean, because air freight out of China is getting crazy, because all of the passenger airlines have canceled flights until at least end of March, end of April, going into China, which means there's no flights out of China as well, which means capacity is very, very low. And that drives prices to levels that I've never seen before. We're talking about 5 times higher than the regular market rate. But the scary situation is that nobody knows what's going to happen in the US, right? They're going to, if they're going to go under a lockdown, what's going to happen with the port, like the ocean port, customs officials. How are we going to release all these goods that are on the way? And we're talking about hundreds of shipments making their way to different ports in the US. We are seeing a lot of difficulties to move cargo out of Europe as well. And the situation is, I don't want to be the bad news breaker, but situation is not really looking very good. Amazon have just announced 2 days ago that they will stop allowing their sellers, their third-party sellers, creating new shipments for their regular products. They've opened certain categories. Most of their, seller categories they've locked down, and you cannot, if you're an Amazon seller, for most of the categories, you cannot create new shipments. And that created a massive panic around the Amazon seller community, because now people have cargo, products in production, but they can't ship it out. So they either have to keep it in China or send it to a 3PL in the States. But the thing is, when you send it to a 3PL in the States, nobody promised you that that 3PL won't be under a lockdown when your cargo will arrive. So there's a big uncertainty in the market right now. And, every day the situation is changing. Things are escalating very fast. So you just gotta keep on monitoring the situation and act as the whole thing evolves.
Interesting. And it's so interesting you have the Chinese perspective, because you work very closely with Chinese manufacturers also. So you could, so visualize the entire value chain, supply chain really down to consumers in the West, and whether it's Europe, or the US. Okay, which brings me to Yuri could you please explain how a 3PL differs from a 4PL? And then we talk about what your situation is right now, and what has been in the past week with the whole COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the 3PL is generally more a transactional type business, where 4PL just sort of outsources an entire supply chain to an outside party. So,
Okay.
for example, we are a 4PL for Google and for GE and a few other big companies, to where we run their supply chain. We design their forward logistics, reverse logistics, compliance, whatever is needed, to where we sometimes manage their carriers on their behalf. So again, we don't necessarily do the transactional business with them, but we manage overall the supply chain, the aspect of supply chain they want us to. So think of it kind of just as a outsourcing your entire, let's say, traffic department, rather than just, bidding out or having certain shipments or specific lanes handled.
Super.
And,
so
yes.
what are your typical clients? You mentioned Google. Do you typically work with conglomerates, or is it a mix with smaller merchants and bigger merchants?
No, usually it's on the 4PL side, it's some of the larger companies that have very complex supply chains, companies that kind of want to bring in some business intelligence and optimizations into their supply chain without wanting to invest massive amounts of money into, whether it's technology or people. It's an outsourced model. So basically, our motto, our pitch to them is always saying, okay, well, if you're going to build locomotives, and then let us handle your supply chain. Supply chain is not your core competency; it is ours.
Where are you dialing from? What states are you dialing from?
I'm dialing from Erie, Pennsylvania.
From Pennsylvania, okay.
So far in Erie, we have one confirmed case of coronavirus, and majority of our employees are at work in the office.
Okay.
We have left it totally open to people, so if people are, if they feel unsafe or whatever, they can work from home, but they still have an option to come into the office, at least for now. And most of the employees are here in the office. So we're in the old train station and have about 200 people sitting at this location.
Okay. Incredible. And so what kind of signals are you getting from your clients that, that sort of given an atmosphere of uncertainty uncertainty would be the right word for this?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, there's a lot of panic in the industry. There's certainly panic. And I second a lot of what Refael has mentioned too, because it's a domino effect. It's not a US issue. It's not a Europe issue. It's not a China issue. It certainly is a big global issue. And it's a simple supply and demand. And, you can talk about saying, okay, well, what can you deliver from Amazon? Well, there's a lot of products that are out of stock because there's no supply from China, or supply is just kind of slowly reopening. So it's a massive issue. And with the airline cancellations and, majority of the freight moves in passenger airplanes, and a lot of the flights have been canceled. So, so the rates are through the roof. And, we've seen even certain shifts where we are not necessarily helping our clients with their supply chains. We're actually helping them staff up and have the infrastructure to be able to work from home. So we are shipping hundreds of monitors, computers, and different things that, to thousands of employee homes, so they can be able to work and, provide services to their employers from home. So it's a big issue. And, especially with the service industry, with unemployment rates, there's certainly a lot of, changes, a lot of panic. And our motto is to just, we will continue to do whatever we can, get creative. If there is cargo stuck in JFK, we'll truck it to Miami and try to fly it out. So kind of, this is the ability to, that certain companies will do really well. And those are the companies that have entrepreneurial spirit and ability to kind of solve problems, because a lot of the bigger guys are kind of shutting down and saying like, oh, well, we can't work, everything is bad. So, this type of market also creates certain opportunities. It allows you to, to go to bat for your customers and for them to really see your value, because when everything's going great, anybody can do it. It's when times get tough, that's when, you really find out who your partners are.
Super interesting. I like that, where there's that silver lining there. Erich, so we've talked about the past week, and things as unfolding right now. what are your projections, moving forward? So this morning, a lockdown was announced in the city of London, and that's 10 million people, huge, financial hub in the world, one of the most important cities in the world. That's probably going to escalate, across the UK. New York is considering that. Where do you see payments going? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but the patterns you're probably seeing, you've seen, from the past, will kind of give you a bit of an indication of where you think things will go from a payment standpoint, because you're at the demand side, and Refael and Yuri are more on the delivery side. So what are you seeing? So now that people are potentially going to be stuck at home, where do you see payments in e-commerce and generally for all merchants you serve?
Well, the good news for the payments industry is over the last 15 years, it has become almost entirely digitized to the point that there's very little manual processes, things that require people to be inside an office together to handle the transaction or anything related to the transaction. So the payments industry is very well prepared for something like this. The problem is that the other ends of the process, if you will, which they were just talking about in terms of logistics and delivery, is not. That still requires people. It still requires people to manage the cases and the products as they move through the warehouses and the assemblies and the delivery, the actual physical delivery. So I think what this is going to probably result in, I'll talk a couple things. One, in terms of volumes, you're going to see a massive shift of payment volume from physical locations to online channel in the categories that you would expect. You're going to see a massive shift for food. So lots of food is going to move through online payment. You're going to see essentials, things like paper products and home goods, the things that you need to actually live your day-to-day life inside the home. You're probably going to see a plummet in luxury products. So things that you need.
Announced the shutdown of their factories.
Yeah. You're going to see a massive plummet in luxury products, our products related to vacations, and you're going to see a substantial reduction in payments related to obviously buying vacations and purchasing plane tickets and all of those kinds of things. So you're going to see the payments industry is going to see this massive shift in payment volume from those kinds of products to the products that I mentioned before, which is primarily food and staples and things like that. But those are going to see substantial increases, and that's what should be expected from the payments industry. But I think on the physical goods side, in the logistics, I think this will be a wake-up call. Lots of people have talked about drone delivery and all kinds of automation around that, but really, how do you prepare your supply chains and your logistics to be able to be essentially pandemic proof or global disaster proof? And that'll be an interesting development over the next 1 to 3 years. And it'll take a long time.
I can imagine.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of topics on this. Yes.
Okay. So if you look at the groceries industry, I don't know what the figures are in the United States, but that they're almost single digits in most countries as compared to physical. Would you for more food to shift online, we need to up our game with deliveries. Where what comes, that has to come first, and that will take time. So we had yeah, sure.
I was going to say that's probably the biggest obstacle right now, which is that a lot of companies like Amazon have invested in delivery and Walmart and others have invested a lot in really good delivery capabilities around food and groceries. However, this puts a huge strain on everything they built, because in the end, those rely on people and interaction with people. And so that you're going to probably see, some of these companies say same day, within a couple hours kind of delivery. Those are probably going to switch to something like maybe 2 days or 3 days if they can fulfill the order at all, which I do envision them to be able to fulfill these orders, because there's going to be so much volume. The companies that have invested in the infrastructure to be able to automate and handle these kinds of deliveries, I think are going to do extraordinarily well over the next several months because they have the capability to actually be able to handle even next day delivery or 2-day delivery right now is going to be considered pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Refael, where do you see what's the outlook? So what's you're dialing in from Israel, right? From Tel Aviv, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So are your operations very human? So obviously you have logistics, you have offices in China and all over the world. But in Israel, how many people are at the office right now?
Right now, we are about 4 people out of 40 here in our Israel office. We are all set to be working from home. Israel is taking extreme measures to try and contain that virus and not become the next Italy or the next, other country in Europe. Because I think they are doing good. I'm pro lockdown. I would rather than having a complete lockdown and getting rid of it like in a month or 2 months like China did or South Korea did, right? If you don't enforce a complete lockdown, you can't control the whole thing. You just can't control people affecting other people, and that's a problem. So everything here, most of the shops are closed, shopping malls are closed, and we expect the government to put a complete lockdown under the law so you can get fined. If you go out, you'll get fined. And to be honest, I think that's the right way to try and contain the whole situation. Because again, as long as people are outside, they are just infecting each other, and you can't get rid of it this way. It's just getting worse and worse. We see numbers getting, people are, new affected, like 100 people a day. But that they say by the statistics, it'll double itself every 2 or 3 days. Yeah. So it can get very bad, like in 2 weeks, if we don't contain it right now.
Yeah. And so, China is kind of sorted now. What's your outlook? What is your 1 month outlook? Moving, looking forward for logistics at a global scale.
Well, from what we see, as far as China, I can divide it into 2 separate topics. China production capacity, which we see it goes much better now, and it gets better by the day. But then you look at the logistics capacity. Again, ocean freight out of China is fine, is working, it's operational. That's not a problem. The problem is at the destination country. How effective it's going to be on the destination country. Will you be able to customs release it? Will you be able to find the truck to do it in the right price and the right quote you gave your client? As Yuri said, there are always solutions. You can move things from port to port. You will be able to find a solution. The question is how much it's going to cost. But as far as China, I would expect from the numbers and the analysis we do with our Chinese office and talking to all these Chinese manufacturers every day, we expect China to be back on track production-wise. By May, most of the factories will be over 80% production capacity, and things will almost look as normal as it was last year. China was handling that crisis very well, to my opinion. But yeah, production-wise, we see things going very well in the next month, and I expect by May, most of things will get back to normal, most of the factories. Logistics-wise, air freight, it really depends how the situation will evolve in the world. Most of the passenger airlines has canceled the flight till mid-April, start of April. So we don't see any improvement. We don't expect to see any improvement on the air freight sector by mid-April, start of May. Now, even when they'll start, kickstarting the jumping up the flights again, you're still gonna have a massive backlog of goods trying to go out of China. So, logistics-wise, air freight, I would expect things And again, it depends on how the situation evolves worldwide, because as we said, that's a worldwide crisis now. That's on not only China or a certain country, that's all over the world. But you would expect things to get better logistics-wise by, again, mid-May, start of June, unfortunately. And that's a long time from now. That's like 3 months from now.
And there's also the demand side, to think about. So, I can't imagine shopping, just alluding to what Erich said. I can't imagine, shopping for non-essentials right now. That has a rippled effect on what's coming in, what, merchants are going to potentially order to stock, what kind of inventory they're going to stock.
Yeah, so basically we see a major spike in office supplies because people are at home and, you have kids at home. So we see a major spike in office supplies, medical devices, and basically essentials, just as you said, household goods, just regular products, essential products. We see a major spike and a major demand for moving those goods out of China. Again, the problem is capacity.
And also even laptops. So my wife works for a huge publisher, and they were not really prepared, online for moving, for remote working, and they're ordering thousands of laptops to give people who essentially are always on desktops in their offices across the world. And yeah, it's incredible, it's obviously challenging, I would think.
The problem is, a lot of people are getting laid off, and there will be less money to spend. And as we all know and forecast, we're going to an economic slowdown. So, as you said, luxury goods are going to take a major hit. Household goods will be on the rise. The question is, how long will it take us to get back on track economically? People getting back to work. A lot of these companies, a lot of these small companies, SMBs are gonna have a lot of trouble getting back on track because they've been shut down. And once they'll get back to work, a lot of people are gonna be in debt. So I expect many employees, they won't have a place to go back to because these companies are going to get in trouble financially because
of their bailouts at massive scale, which is complex in itself.
Yeah.
Yuri, from your perspective, from the 4PL perspective, obviously your clients are conglomerates, and they need their entire logistics and supply chain sorted by companies like yours. What do you think the outlook is from that perspective in the next quarter or so?
Yeah, I mean, the outlook is pretty bad at this point because, even though the factories in China are reopening, but then the main factories here, whether it's the big, the Detroit companies or whether it's the aviation side, they are, facing possibilities of shutdown. So kind of it becomes the reverse. They needed the supply, the demand was there, but supply wasn't there, and now the supply is reopening, but the demand is dwindling. So it's a mess of a fact. And, to kind of very similar to outlook to what Refael has said, right now what we're seeing is that quite a few airlines are putting passenger aircraft in rotation to move cargo. So the airplanes fly completely empty, but the belly's loaded with cargo, even without, and it still can be actually profitable without the passengers and their luggage. Some airlines, some big ones will absolutely need bailouts. Some of the really big ones are running completely out of cash, and this is still early in this. It's going to take a long time for that demand to come back, especially for the normal travelers and everything else. So from what we're seeing is they're repurposing their aircraft for more cargo. We as a company, we are quoting and moving certain charters. And that's one way to keep your supply chain going. It's a very expensive way, but it takes about 5 to 6 days to set up a charter between, let's say, China and United States. And if you have a customer that doesn't quite need the entire charter, but you have 2 or 3 of them, and then you can open it in the market and look for, ask other 3PLs, 4PLs, your competitors, and say, hey guys, we have half an aircraft we need to fill up. So there is a way to create some of this capacity, and that's something that we are doing. So kind of as I've mentioned, it's the kind of the creativity. and the drive, what's going to kind of keep a lot of these strategic goods that are moving. But at the same time, it will affect a lot of companies. A lot of companies that are not financially strong will just run out of money. And there could be potential bankruptcies. And as you've mentioned, bailouts will go to the big guys. The smaller size companies, the medium sized companies will have to survive on their own. So, we as a company and a lot of our customers, we are hoping on the time frame that Refael has mentioned, because there was no new cases today in China, and we've hoped that the U.S. can kind of follow the same. Like, it hasn't peaked yet, but once it peaks, it starts to go down, and life starts to kind of resume to normal. But there's always a risk of second waves.
That's the thing, even in China.
And
because not the entire population haven't built the immunity against the virus.
The virus, yep. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and the issue here is that nobody really knows. So a lot of the stuff is opinions, speculations, but nobody really knows. A lot of people didn't think this would go this far, and and the thing is, it's just you have to be nimble and kind of reactive and just deal with any situation that is thrown at you. And that's the way that most companies should deal with, because that's what will help everybody, the global economy, to come back.
What are you seeing from your clients? How are your clients communicating the situation? Because one advice that's going around, circulating around the e-commerce industry is get the situation from get the actual situation from your logistics partner and communicate effectively with your customer base as to what things are looking like right now. So what are you seeing your best in class clients doing from a communication standpoint with their clients as to the situation with delivering, with last mile, with getting the goods to who they're intended to get to?
Yeah, the communication largely are good. I mean, these clients have many, they have many people on staff. They have medical experts. They have, very complex BI capabilities. So they are, trying to do a great job keeping their customers informed. They are trying to build contingency plans. They are reaching out to us, kind of very proactively and saying, okay, guys, like, is there anything we can do? And so what we're doing is we're opening up a lot of emergency warehousing that is more kind of inland, whether it's a Erie, PA, or whether it's, Ohio, Minnesota, away from some of the major trading hubs that might be closing down. And again, it just common sense dictates that the situations might not be as bad in these regions. So what we're doing, we're staffing up a lot of, additional emergency warehouses. We're trying to reroute some of the cargo to bypass some of the hot zones and kind of continue to operate. So it's a lot of communication back and forth. It's a lot of kind of, whiteboarding it, where you just look at a board and say, okay, well, here's what we think, here's what's going to happen. We don't really know, but here's some of the steps that could potentially help you if best case scenario, worst case scenario. So just kind of, a lot of communication and a lot of kind of proactive planning is the, is the key in these instances.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have some comments on that just around payment.
Yes, please go for it.
So one of the things that merchants need to be prepared for, I think, is probably a spike in chargebacks and refunds. And they need to be able to actually have really robust ways in which they communicate to their buyers. So, and make it clear what the risks are. So if you're saying it's a 5 to 7 day delivery time frame, you need to maybe provide yourself some wiggle room to say this time frame may be impacted by disruptions in transportation because of the pandemic, and we will give you, tracking number and communicate with you if there are any delays. And I would probably forecast an increase in chargebacks and refunds, because when the customer doesn't get it in 5 to 7 days, they're going to immediately call Visa, MasterCard, their bank, and say, I never got this product when I wanted it, and so I reverse the charge. So I do predict that there's going to be a spike in chargebacks.
And do you think Visa or MasterCard would change their policies slightly to be a bit forgiving to merchants given the situation?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the near term. So I think you have to rely on them keeping their policies the way they are.
Communication is absolutely essential. I think.
Yeah, so you want the shopper, the buyer, to not actually institute that chargeback. And so open communication, continuous communication is really, really important. But I mean, just from a forecasting perspective, I would probably, if I was a merchant, forecast an increase in chargebacks and refunds.
Interesting. Thank you. That's
excellent advice.
Yeah, I didn't even think about. Okay, guys, we're going to wrap up with one final question. Everybody should kindly, answer, which is, what's your remote working situation or strategy if you haven't deployed remote working as yet in this crisis? I'll start out with Refael.
That's an interesting question. For me, all of the employees, all of the offices are well equipped to be working from home. We are all connected. We are, meeting twice a day over Zoom meetings and, video conferences. For me personally,
what's your tech stack like? Sorry to interject, but everybody, what's your tech stack like? And Refael, sorry, I just wanted to add that for that's enabling, efficient remote working.
Well, I was starting to say that for me personally, I have 3 little boys at home. My oldest son is 3 years old, and if we are going into a lockdown, I won't have the nanny, and I'll need to go on a vacation at home for helping the wife with the babies. But the department managers, they all have their own routines with their teams, and we have our own BI systems and analysis ways to make sure everything is on track, and shoot up exceptions if anything needs like an urgent attention. We set up like a 24/7 customer support teams that if, as Erich says, delays are gonna be a major thing now. Delays in transportations, delays in clearances, delays in getting your product on your, you got a quote, you estimated your transit time, but that's gonna change. I would say that's gonna change, and sometime it's gonna change dramatically. So as Erich is preparing for refunds, we are preparing for a lot of complaints, for a lot of clients pushing and going crazy. Where's my cargo? So we actually set up a 24/7 support teams that will be on duty to just answer those calls and make sure we are doing everything in order to meet those transit times to the clients.
Interesting, super interesting. And then Yuri, what is it? What I know you guys are still based in the office, but in the event that there's a required or mandated remote working situation, what would it look like, and what tech stack would you put in place to support it?
It's an excellent question. We're very well prepared for something like this. So 2 things. One, you're not as affecting working from home as you are from the office. So there's certainly a downside. But, for us, for example, logistics industry is 24/7. So, when I'm done with my work, the work in Australia, Indonesia starts. So majority of our people, about 99% of people are remote anyways. They take their laptops home, they have their VPNs, they have access to our systems. So to be honest with you, a lot of them have full scanning capability. So they are able to work, to work from home with almost no disruption to the process itself. It's just, so being kind of a non-asset and being in the service industry, that certainly is a benefit and easy for us to scale up. It's, it's for the manufacturers. When they are at home, they certainly can't manufacture anything. So that's the bigger issue. But from the working home standpoint, we are prepared. We use, whether it's Teams or Zoom, and those, those tech stocks right now are going way up. I mean, I don't know if it's still going up with the entire collapse of the financial markets, but these are very effective tools. And I mean, we're using one right now, and from all over the world, and it's a effective communication tool. So I feel like our company is probably not as affected by working remotely as some of the other the big whether it's the manufacturers or people that have to work from a certain location.
Fantastic. Erich, you're dialing in from home, and I think your entire team is now working remote. What does it look like, and how prepared were you guys?
Luckily, we prepared for this actually pretty early and procured laptops for the people that didn't have them, installed encryption software on those laptops. We deal with payment information and data, so obviously everything for us is about security and accessibility. So we went to 100% remote several weeks ago before a lot of this really became really bad. And we can sustain 100% remote work for the foreseeable future. We use collaboration tools, various ones, just because certain ones are better for certain purposes. We use Skype, we use Slack, we use GoToMeeting, and then everything is VPN access into our systems. Even in our data center, we don't need to physically go there to administer our applications and servers and everything. So we're pretty well suited for this. Like I said, I think the payments industry was well prepared for something like this. I think it's the other industries that are not necessarily.
Exactly. Do you have daily stand-ups with employees?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. Different teams. I mean, we're a software company, and we work in an agile methodology, and so it's very necessary for us to have daily team meetings and across the various teams that we have. Lots of virtual meetings, like Yuri said. But some people actually say that they're more productive at home because they don't have workers constantly coming to them.
And if the kids are around or not.
It does that does make it hard because the kids are out of school,
exactly,
and so they're there to kind of like pester them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And where you typically based, if not working remote, what states in America are you?
We're headquartered out of Atlanta, Georgia,
Okay.
and Bucharest, Romania, and Amsterdam, Netherlands.
Global.
So those are our main offices.
Okay.
But we have people all over the world.
Okay. Incredible. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I got a lot of insights into the front and the back, and the backbone. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Erich, Refael, and Yuri. It's really, really, really appreciative. I would. We're grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much, everyone.
Keep safe, everyone. Yeah.